Hello everyone, it's Scott. We're back for the final day of Bloomburrow previews. We only have a few cards to talk about today. Most of them are going to be limited, impactful cards, but we got a couple cards that might have some standard playability as well. And reminder that over the next few days, I'll be doing top 10 lists for mythic rares, and uncommons. So to give you an idea of what I think is going to be the most impactful things when it comes to standard during Bloomburrow standard season. So let's dive into today's previews. So the last rare we got from the set is Valley Flamecaller for 2 and a red mana. You get a Lizard Warlock, that's a 3/3. And if a lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1. So nice ability on this card where you're benefiting from having this on the battlefield. In essence, is doing damage without even having to attack. And if you're making a deck that's going to be around any of these types or a combination of them, I think it's a card that will see some play in standard. Next, we've got Jolly Gerbils for 1 and a white mana. You get a hamster, that's a citizen, and is a 2/3. And whenever you give a gift, draw a card. So I think this is going to be a very solid card in limited because we know we've got so many cards throughout the set that have that option of giving a gift. And if you're in a deck where you're going to be consistently having the opportunity to give gifts, I think this is a really good card because it basically is a 2/3 for 2 mana that can consistently draw you cards. So I think that makes it playable under those circumstances. All right, next we've got some commons that I think will have at least impact when it comes to limited. So the first is Crumble and Get It for a white mana. You get an instant that's Gift of Food, and target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If the gift was promised, that creature also gains Indestructible until end of turn. So nice limited playable instant to either buff a creature or provide protection for a creature in white. Certainly a limited playable card. Next we have Intrepid Rabbit for 2 and a white mana. You get a Rabbit Soldier. That's a 3/2. It has Offspring of 1. You may pay an additional 1 mana when you cast this spell. If you do, when this creature enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 token copy of it. And when this creature enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So limited playable in the sense that the offspring cost is low, and also you're in essence buffing a creature when it comes into play. So as long as you're able to do that, I think this is going to be playable. Next, we've got Dazzling Denial for 1 and a blue mana. You get an instant, and you get to counter a target spell unless its controller pays 2. If you control a bird, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4 instead. So I think this is very easily a nice replacement for things that we're going to be losing. So we're already using a card very similar to this in standard. So I think this is a card that if you're in a bird deck, I think I would want to have this as a nice denial spell. But outside of that, I think it could even see play beyond that, simply because being able for 2 mana, making your opponent pay 2 additional mana unless they do, you counter that spell, I think is good enough for standard playability. At least it has been over the last several years. Next, we've got Sure Up, which is a reprint. And it's an instant where target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof until end of turn, and untap it. So Sure Up, if that is it, prowess deck is going to be successful. I think cards like this will be part of that, where you can give something hexproof, protect it, and then also if you're using it on your opponent's turn, now that creature will be able to block as well when you give it that additional buff. Next is Bonebind Orator. For 1 and a black mana, you get a Squirrel Warlock Bard. That's a 2/2. And for 3 and a black mana, exile Bonebind Orator from your graveyard. Return another creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So in limited, I think this is a decent card because you can play it on turn 2. If it dies, no big deal. You can exile it from your graveyard to bring something else back that's important to your game plan in a limited setting. Next, we've got Dagger Fang Duo for 2 and a black mana. You get a rat squirrel. That's a 3/2 with Death Touch. And when Dagger Fang Duo enters, you may mill 2 cards. So if you're looking to do things like forage, I think this is a card that helps you in limited get the cards you need to into your graveyard so you can pay those forage costs. Next, we've got Ravine Raider for 1 black mana. You get a Lizard Rogue. That's a 1/1 with Menace. And you can pay 1 and a black mana to give Ravine Raider +1/+1 until end of turn. So I think as a 1-drop in limited, perfectly good card to have at the low end of your mana curve, and the ability to use your mana late in the game to pump additional mana into this to give it a +1/+1 on each turn, I think is more than playable in limited. Our last black card of the day is Savor for 1 and a black mana. You get an instant, and target creature gets -2/2 until end of turn, and you get to create a food token. Normally this -2/2 ability costs 1 mana, but in essence you're paying an extra mana to get a food token, and I think that's reasonable in limited. Moving on to red, we've got Roughshod Duo for 2 and a red mana. You get a Mouse Raccoon. That's a 3/2 with Trample. And whenever you expend 4, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains Trample until the end of the turn. So that ability to, in the late game in limited, go ahead and cast a large creature, and then you can give something +1/+1 and it gains Trample might be what you need to be able to get that last bit of damage through. So I think this card is definitely playable in the limited setting. Next, we've got 3 Tree Root Weaver for 1 and a green mana. You get a 1/3. That's a Mole Druid, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So perfectly good mana creature in limited, where you can use this to get any color you need to help your mana fixing in limited. All right, so not that much was previewed on this last day, but I think there were some significant things for limited here. And remember, over the next few days, I'm going to do some top 10 lists to kind of give you an idea of what I think are going to be the cards that will be most impactful on Standard as we move into Bloomburrow Standard season. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout the rest of Bloomburrow season and beyond. Thanks. I'll see you next time.